Danny. I grunted, resisting the literal call of the waking world and rolling over, burying my face into the pillow. Danny. The call came again. Still soft, but a little more insistent. I let out a sound which to me sounded like what, but in retrospect was likely more than a grumble. A moment later, I felt hands gently shaking my shoulder, and I reluctantly allowed them to chase away the last vestige of sleep. Danny, wake up, darling. It's almost noon. Paula's words caused me to open my eyes and look at the vintage alarm clock on the bedside table. She was right. According to the two hands, it was 11:43. All right, I'm up, I grumbled. The words actually passing from my lips this time as I forced myself to sit up in bed. Paula sat on the edge of the bed next to me, already dressed in a white button-up shirt and pair of slacks. A smile played over her lips and our eyes locked. Good morning, Sleeping Beauty, she proclaimed. How do you feel? I rubbed my eyes, feeling the throb from last night's rather excessive drinking session already starting. Aside from the jackhammer team already going to work behind my temples, oh, I'm great, I said sarcastically, earning a laugh from her. Well, you did decide to go more than a little overboard with the alcohol, darling. I gave her a sly look. Maybe, but you didn't seem to mind that when we went to bed. Paula's cheeks turned red, and she gave me a gentle push, giggling softly. I threw the covers back, sliding my feet down onto the carpeted floor. Anyway, what have you been up to while I've been snoring away? I asked. She gestured at the old-school television, which stood at the foot of the bed. I slept like a log as well. After I ordered up some room service, I decided to try watching some TV, see what sort of stuff Vegas has on its channels. She gave me a perplexed look. But it's the weirdest thing. All they were showing were reruns of extremely old TV shows from like 60 years ago or so. Although, I did enjoy this sort of neat game show that was playing called I Got a Secret. They should really bring that back. I shrugged my shoulders. I guess they're really playing up the old school angle with this hotel. Sort of a stay with us and take a step back in time sort of thing. I allowed an annoyed look to fall over my face. Although I'm not sure I'll leave a glowing review. I mean, where else forced to use my lucky vintage bill? When we checked in, it had ended up being a bit of a hassle. For whatever reason, neither of our credit cards were able to be accepted. It'd be a surprise, as we'd never had a problem using them before, and since we'd both decided not to carry cash with us on the trip, and get it out of an ATM once we'd reached the hotel, I was forced to use something rather precious to me. It was a vintage $1,000 bill, one I'd bought years ago before the prices on them on eBay went through the roof. Luckily, even though they hadn't been circulated in a long time, they could apparently still be used as legal tender, since it was accepted by the manager. To say it was painful to hand it over, though, was an understatement. The only thing that made it somewhat bearable was the amount that we had to pay. Almost shockingly, it cost a fraction of what the quoted price for the Venetian had been. And for that, I was grateful. Paula rubbed my shoulders. Well, at least you bought 2 of them from the collector. You still have the other one at home. I gave a small smile and nodded at her. God bless this woman for always helping me look on the bright side. Now, let me get dressed. We'll head downstairs. I'd like to get something for brunch myself, at least a cup of coffee. And we'll plan out what to do today. All the tickets they gave us, they'll give us plenty to do for the next 2 weeks. The hotel apparently hosted a nightly show called Casino de Paris, a sort of retro burlesque-style performance, which we'd been given tickets to watch for almost the entire duration of our stay. In addition, we'd been given tickets to shows playing around the city. They were all for tribute acts, though, such as one for a Frank Sinatra and Friends tribute act, which was playing over at another hotel and casino I'd never heard of before called the Sands. Paula smiled, hopping off the bed excitedly as I stood up and walked to my suitcase. 10 minutes later, I'd finished getting dressed, slipping into a fresh t-shirt and pair of jeans, quickly brushed my teeth, and the 2 of us were locking our room and heading for the elevator. A fresh-faced man who apparently operated the elevator controls greeted us as the door opened. Going down, sir? He asked as we stepped inside. Yeah, lobby, please, I said, still feeling a bit hungover and sluggish. Obediently, he pressed the button, and the doors closed. The elevator shuddered slightly as our descent down to the lobby began. As the soft elevator music pierced my ears, I looked around and noticed that the man was eyeing me rather strangely. I looked down at myself. I don't see anything on my clothes that would warrant him looking at me like that, I thought. Finally, he spoke. If you don't mind me asking, sir, are you two from the same place as the others? The question threw me for a bit of a loop. What do you mean? I asked in return. He shrugged his shoulders. Nothing, sir, just... We sometimes have guests who drop in who... He shot me another quick look before finishing. Who look... well... like they're not from around here. He shook his head. I'm sorry, sir, that was rude of me. My curiosity got the better of me. For a moment, I stayed silent. The awkwardness and, frankly, strangeness of the man's question making me feel equal amounts perplexed and weirded out. But I resolved to be polite. I shook my head. It's quite all right, I said, letting the silence fall over us again. I felt a particularly sharp stab of pain behind my eyes, and I closed them, reaching up and rubbing my thumb and index fingers into them. Blue spots exploded in the darkness behind my eyelids, and I let off a soft groan. Hey, do you know where the nearest place is that I can get a bottle of aspirin? I softly asked the man. He didn't respond. My shoulders slumped, and I let out a soft sigh. Excuse me, sir? I said a little louder. I still received no reply. Feeling a little frustrated, compounded by my pounding headache, I pulled my hand away from my face and opened my eyes, ready to give him a piece of my mind. But any verbal lashing I had built up in my throat died away. The elevator was completely empty. What? Both Paula and the attendant had seemingly vanished into thin air. I twisted around, looking behind me to see nothing but wood paneling. Okay, what the fuck's going on? I know I didn't hallucinate stepping into the elevator with my wife or seeing the attendant. I fought back the rapidly rising waves of confusion and worry, stepping forward and hitting the already lit up button for the lobby twice, as if my repeated jabs would somehow spur it on quicker, but it simply continued descending, unhurried. Finally, the loud ding announcing its arrival to the lobby sounded, and the doors slid open to reveal pitch blackness. The only light was what spilled out from the elevator, creating a long, rectangular glow across the floor. Okay, what the actual fuck? I whispered quietly. I most certainly wasn't taking a damn step out the elevator into the dark. Not when I had no idea what was happening. I remembered my phone suddenly, reaching into my pocket and pulling it out. Snapping the screen open, I found the flashlight icon and hit it. Instantly, a bright white beam of light sprayed forward, shooting out into the darkness. I stepped as close as I dared to the open doors and leaned out slightly, panning the light around. It bounced off the massive empty shape of a secondary employee desk. Luggage cart piled high with suitcases in front of it. There wasn't a soul in sight. Is there a power outage or something? I wondered. But no, it wouldn't explain the absence of everyone. Maybe there's a solar eclipse or something happened outside and everyone's gone to watch. I pushed that idea away as well. I hadn't heard of any eclipse coming up in the near future, and again, it wouldn't explain why the people behind the counter and all the guests disappeared, not to mention where the hell Paula and the elevator guy went. That was when the light in the elevator began to flicker. My head snapped up to look at it, as it began to rapidly blink off and back on again. Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Really? I hissed out between gritted teeth. It was like the inevitable, predictable conclusion of a damn horror movie scene, one of the oldest tropes in the book. Swallowing hard, I looked around to see if there was anything I could snatch up to defend myself if need be. but there was nothing remotely in that category, barring if I wanted to try to rip the metal door from the elevator's wiring system off its hinges. I felt my pulse accelerate as the light flickered on and off quicker. Every time it plunged me into complete darkness, save for my phone's flashlight, my heart pounded in my chest like a drum. I had no idea what the hell to do. It felt as though I were in a lose-lose situation. A heavy hand suddenly fell on my shoulder, its fingers feeling as though they were cutting into my skin. I let out a half scream as I attempted to twist around to see who was grabbing me, but the grip tightened, shooting a wave of pain through me. And I was thrown forward. I sailed through the air like I was a rag doll before crashing into the marble floor. The breath was driven from my lungs. I let out a cut-off cry of pain, adrenaline coursing through my veins, and I rolled onto my back, sitting up as quickly as I could. I still clutched my phone in my hand, somehow having held onto it during my short flight, and I aimed it back towards the still open elevator doors. I felt all the blood drain from my face as the beam landed on a figure. It was dressed, all in black, not an inch of skin exposed, all except for its eyes. It was as if whoever I was staring at had a ski mask over their face made of a material I'd never seen before. What seemed to be like holes had been made around the eyes, and the ones that stared back at me were clearly human. Except no eyes I'd ever seen had ever had that much sadistic glee in them before. The figure stepped out of the elevator, and a pang of absolute terror coursed through me as I saw they were holding what appeared to be a fire axe in their right hand, one which seemed to already have blood on its blade and handle. Oh, hell in a handbasket! I scrambled to my feet, attempting to put as much distance between myself and the axe-wielding figure, and then the elevator doors closed, plunging the lobby, save for my phone's tiny flashlight, into utter blackness. My heart felt as though it was about to explode out of my chest as I saw the figure take another step towards me. It was slow, deliberate, almost as if they were trying to anticipate my next move. I quickly looked around, making sure to keep the menacing shape in my peripheral vision as I searched for somewhere to go. I knew the second I made a break for it, the figure would make a lunge for me. I couldn't explain how I knew, but I could simply tell they were waiting for me to make the first move, and whoever it was relishing the tense moments in between. An idea suddenly surged forward in my brain, one which, if I didn't time it perfectly, would literally wind up with me pulling a Dick Halloran and end up with an axe in my stomach. My head. I tensed up every muscle in my body, looking towards the left as though I were about to run toward the entrance hallway. I saw the figure also tense up, now holding the axe with both hands. I suddenly put all forces on my legs, using the floor almost as a sort of springboard. Years of track and field instinct kicked in, and I feigned, starting to dash to the left, and instantly the figure was a blur of motion, raising the axe and dashing silently towards me. I turned and shot backwards, forced to turn the light away from my attacker as I made my leap. Behind me, I could practically feel the air being parted by the axe, and a second after beginning my leap, heard it smash into the marble floor, where I'd been standing not a second ago. But I was sailing through the air, praying I'd calculated correctly. To my relief, I did, as the edge of the desk passed underneath me, and I landed on the floor behind it. From the other side, I finally heard the figure let out a sound. Ugh! Sounded like a cry of frustration and rage, and it motivated me to leap to my feet faster than I thought possible. I flashed the light around, catching the heart-stopping view of the shape running towards the desk, raising the axe over its head. I didn't wait to see what happened next. Instead, I ran for the open partition which separated the employee area from the rest of the lobby. Behind me, I heard the figure vault over the counter, landing with a heavy thud on the floor, but I'd already ran from behind the counter. I knew I couldn't make it to the entrance lobby, and instead, I aimed for the first door my light caught in its beam. It was a silver metal door marked Employees Only. A moment later, I smashed into it with my shoulder, the door crashing into the wall with a massive bang. Behind me, I heard the pounding footsteps of my pursuer, and without knowing where to go, I ran. I wound up in some sort of employee hallway, likely one of many which wound their way through the hotel and casino. A rack of sheets flew by in a blur on my left, and I came to a T-junction, opting to turn right. I heard the door to the lobby smash open as the figure entered the hallway, and I used the sound as motivation to run faster. Despite the fire that seemed to be burning in my legs, a few seconds later I came to another T-junction. This one seemed identical to the last. I chose to run to the left this time, but as I did, something I saw for a split second caught my eye. It was a security camera, one which had been aimed down the hallway in the direction I'd come from. I didn't have much time to see all the details on it as I was too busy running for my life, but there'd been enough time to notice one. The red blinking light showing it was recording had flashed out into the darkness. The realization flew away from my brain as I was too preoccupied with staying a hallway or two ahead of my pursuer. I could still hear them behind me. The thundering of their footsteps drowned mine out entirely. Ahead of me I saw another metal door, this one with no lettering on it. The hallway broke off to the left and right, but I'd already decided I was going through the door. With any luck, I'd find a place I could hide for a while, allowing the figure to assume I'd kept running and rushed past. It would give me not only a chance to catch my rapidly dwindling breath, but also double back and find the door I'd entered the back hallways to. From there, I could run to the entrance. My plan set, I poured on all the power I had remaining in me. The door flying up to greet me, I lowered my shoulder and smashed into it, flying into the room. Or I slammed into something which knocked me back, halfway back into the hallway. I let out a grunt of pain as I landed on my ass, a stabbing feeling traveling up my tailbone and spine. I snapped my phone up, aiming the flashlight into the room to see what I'd slammed into. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that my heart stopped. My breathing caught in my throat, and I felt a tidal wave of abject horror flood into every fiber of my being. The beam had caught the figure of a person, standing less than a foot or two away from where I lay in a crumpled heap on the floor. One which was dressed identical to the one which had been chasing me. Like the other, this one too carried an axe, though this one had no blood on it. I twisted around, wondering if my pursuer had shot down an alternate corridor to get ahead of me, anticipating my move, but no, I could both hear and now see them running down the hallway towards me, toward us. I spun back towards the newcomer and felt, if possible, an even greater wave of horror shoot through me. The figure wasn't alone in the room beyond. A second had moved into the beam of light. He was joined by a third, and then a fourth and fifth. In the span of 10 seconds, the light showed at least 7 or 8 of the figures in the room. Behind me, I heard my pursuer slow to a speed walk. I began to scramble backwards on my hands and knees, out towards the right branch of the hallway. The figures from the room followed, spilling out in slow, silent pursuit. They met my pursuer there, where they stood, still silently watching me scramble away, and then they began to laugh. They all began to laugh, all men's laughter, but filled with absolute evil and malice. They stopped, going silent once more, and slowly began to move towards me. My scrambling intensified, and in my hasty retreat, I forgot to watch where I was going. I felt something slam into the back of my head, while simultaneously a painful jab poked me in my left arm. The arm which had been holding my phone. Reflectively, I dropped it as I jerked my arm back. It clattered to the floor, the beam of light aimed directly up at the ceiling. I looked behind me and saw I had backed into another linen rack. The stabbing sensation had been me hitting a sharp edge, which had pierced the skin. I twisted back around to see how close the figures had gotten, and I let out a half scream. All the figures stood over me. They'd used the moment of distraction to get in close, cutting off any way for me to escape. My breathing came in short, ragged gasps as I realized what was about to happen. As if they'd read my thoughts, all the figures began to raise their axes. The almost maddening sound of their laughter returned as they held them high over their heads. My life suddenly flashed before my eyes, snapshots of being a young child, a teenager, turning 18, meeting Paula, then a single, clear thought. Oh, fuck, this is gonna hurt. I raised my arms in front of my face in some pathetic attempt to ward off the multiple blades about to cut me to ribbons. The blade suddenly whipped down, and I closed my eyes, letting out one last scream of defiance of my fate. "Danny!" The voice cut through the sudden silence. One which was only broken by the soft sound of elevator music? Realizing I wasn't feeling the piercing pain from multiple axe blades, I slowly lowered my arms and opened my eyes. Paula and the elevator operator knelt by my side. A man had a look of concern on his face and Paula's panic. I became aware I was back in the elevator and that I was laying on the floor. For a moment, I couldn't find the words to speak, then... What happened? Paula let out a huge sigh of relief that I'd answered. We had a moment there where the elevator went offline for a moment. It went black for a few seconds. I don't know what happened. If you fell asleep standing up during it or right before the power came back on, you suddenly began screaming. Her voice trailed off, and I realized just how frightened my wife really was. But I was still attempting to make sense of it all. But it felt so real, I thought to myself. The blackout, the figures pursuing me, the pain, it felt real. My mind seemed to race at 1,000,000 miles an hour. The elevator attendant spoke up. Did you get a decent night's sleep, sir? He asked with a tone of concern. For a moment I debated on my answer and then decided to speak truthfully. No, honestly, no, I said weakly. My wife and I didn't get much sleep, and I drank a lot. The man nodded, a relieved smile crossing his face. That's what I figured. Sleep deprivation combined with a large amount of alcohol will cause you to fall asleep for short periods of time, experience horrifying dreams. He reached down and grabbed my arm, pulling me to my feet. My older brother's a doctor, that's how I know about that, he explained. I felt Paula grab my arm to help steady me as I mulled the man's words over in my head. And it made sense. A lot more than... what? Suddenly appearing in some alternate reality where everyone had disappeared, everything was black, and figures with axes were chasing you? I nodded, trying to push away a small voice in the back of my head that attempted to argue that despite the man's words, and the rationalizations my brain was attempting to make, it had been real. But after a moment, it seemed the rational part of my brain won out. I pushed away the nagging voice and attempted to compose myself. Are you sure you're all right, darling? Paula asked me, her voice soft and low. I looked at her, then nodded my head after a moment. Yeah, I'm okay. I let out a deep breath. I guess the incident that happened in the parking lot last night is still in the back of my mind. She nodded, understandingly. That makes sense, she said, then smiled and leaned forward to kiss me. Just please don't scare me like that again. I allowed myself a small smile and pulled her close to me. I'll try my best not to, I said. A moment later, the elevator let out a soft ding, and the doors opened, revealing the brightly lit and bustling lobby. I turned to Paula. Go ahead for a second, sweetheart, I told her quietly. I want to tip the attendant for helping us. For a moment, she seemed concerned, leaving me alone, and then she nodded, stepping out of the elevator. I turned back to the man, pulling my wallet from my back pocket. Hey, look, sir, I'd like to give you something for your troubles with me, I said as I rifled through the massive amounts of bills which now filled it. The man began to protest, but I held up a hand. I insist, my way of saying thank you. It looked as though he wanted to try and protest again, but instead, he stayed silent and nodded. I finally decided to give him a 50. With inflation being the way it was, everyone could use a helping, generous hand every now and then. I pulled it from my wallet and pushed the bill into his hands. For a moment, he stared down at it, and I saw an almost stunned look pass over his face. It looked as though I'd handed him a solid gold bar or something. Oh, well, the guest must not tip these people that hot if he has this much of a reaction just for $50. Mentally shaking my head at how sad that possibility was, I nodded to him and stepped out of the elevator, replacing my wallet in my pocket. I turned back to look at him one final time before the elevators closed, and I involuntarily took a step back. The man had fixed an odd and rather intense gaze on me, one which was unblinking. I can only describe it as more than a little eerie. And then the elevator doors closed. I let out a bewildered snort and turned away. I gotta post a tweet about that odd encounter, I thought, and reached into my pocket for my phone, but it wasn't there. The hell? I muttered, checking my other pockets. I knew for a fact I'd grabbed it before we'd left the room. In fact, I'd even said something about it to Paula. Wait a minute, honey. I'm not leaving my phone after charging it all night. I replayed getting up from the floor of the elevator in my mind. Had I seen it drop when I stared down at my feet for a moment? No, I hadn't. I raised my left hand to scratch at the back of my scalp, coping mechanism for stress that I'd had since I was a child. A sudden stabbing pain coursed through my arm, causing me to let out a bit of a gasp. Lowering my arm quickly, I brought my other hand around to feel the back of it. Another ripple of pain emanated from the area, and I pulled my fingers back to see small droplets of blood on them. The hell did that happen? I muttered quietly to myself. The memory of the waking nightmare suddenly flashed through my mind. I remembered scrambling back straight into the linen rack, which had stabbed into my left arm, exactly where the wound was. A shiver suddenly shot up my spine. It was just a nightmare. A dream. Wasn't it? I shook my head. It's just a coincidence. Moron, I muttered. You hurt yourself in the elevator, that's all. Get a damn grip. Stop going mental on me. Shaking away the nagging thought, I stepped forward to rejoin my wife. Together, we walked the length of the lobby until we reached the main area and approached the check-in counter. The same man as last night, whose name, according to the name tag pinned on his chest, was Arthur, spotted us and smiled wide. "Ah, good morning, you two newlywed lovebirds," he exclaimed, holding out his arms in a similar manner to how he had last night. "How'd you two sleep last night?" Paula let out a snort. "We slept okay, but I think this one," she gestured to me, "is going to lay off the alcohol for the rest of the honeymoon." The man, Arthur, let out a good-natured laugh. "Well, I can't fault him. First few weeks after being married are always a joyous occasion, but sometimes you can overdo it." I let out a snort. "You're not kidding," I grumbled. Paula turned to give me an amused look, then looked back at Arthur. "Do you have any place that serves coffee and either a late breakfast or lunch here? I'd like to get some food and caffeine in there." Arthur let out another good-natured chuckle, then gestured to the front hallway. "Of course, we stop serving breakfast at 11, but if you'd like lunch, our fabulous restaurant, Dome of the Sea, is just outside, a small walk across the parking lot." He leaned forward, "And between you and me, their lunch menu is to die for." He let out another laugh, causing both of us to chuckle at the man's cheery pun. I nodded. "All right, thank you, Arthur," I said. He raised his hands. "Don't mention it. It's what I'm here for." He cleared his throat as we turned away. "By the way, there is a special show happening tonight, taking the place of Casino de Paris. It's called La Parisienne, direct from France, and there's going to be a special guest in it tonight." He looked around, then grinned at us. "Have either of you heard of a singer and actress named Diana Dors?" I looked at Paula and shrugged, my mind drawing a blank. She returned the gesture. No, unfortunately not," I admitted, turning back to the man. He gave me a shocked look. "Well, then you're in for a treat. Just use 2 of your tickets for the other show. They'll be valid for this. And just wait till you hear the singing voice this dame has on her. I'm just happy she chose our stage to perform." I looked to Paula and gave an interested look. She nodded. "God. Sure, thanks for the heads up. We'll check it out," I declared, then rubbed my pounding temples, "after I get coffee and food." He laughed, then waved us away. "Have a lovely day, you two," he called after us. The two of us strode outside into the hot, arid air. As we left the shade of the entrance, I shot a look up. A large statue of what looked like an Arabic sultan stood atop the entrance. The yellow letters spelling out Dunes stretched out to either side. One hell of a mascot, I thought. As we approached the entrance to the restaurant, a huge circular building, something caught my eye. It was an old newspaper vending machine, the kind with an all-glass front. Holy shit, I haven't seen one of these newspaper machines in years, I thought. I thought they stopped using them. I stopped Paula for a second and dropped a quarter into the machine and opened it, pulling a newspaper out and tucking it under my arm without looking. I'll read it inside. What, trying to act sophisticated and old school to match the hotel, darling? My wife asked with an amused smile. I laughed, then gently pushed her forward and through the double doors. The inside of the restaurant was, to use a single word, beautiful. It lived up to its name. Done up in an aquatic theme with an ornate, dark blue roof stretching overhead, water-filled grotto-like areas stood around the tables, and surprisingly, a live band played in one corner. As we were led to our table, I noticed something which threw me for a bit of a loop. All the people having lunch in here were done up to the nines. The men all wore suits looking like they'd just come from a big power meeting. The women wore all fancy-looking dresses. That wasn't the only surprising part about them. All the suits and dresses looked, to put a word on it, extremely vintage. Even the younger patrons, ones around our age, were dressed that way. They all seemed to stare at us as we passed, as if we'd both grown an additional head. Okay, that's honestly a bit weird, but whatever. I put it out of my mind as we sat down and ordered our meals. The coffee was brought to me immediately, and the hot liquid tasted and felt like a godsend. It almost made me forget about the horrifying experience in the elevator, as well as my lost phone and injured arm, both which I couldn't honestly explain and instead kept mentally pushing away. The positive atmosphere and calming music seemed to help. I set the mug down and picked up the newspaper from the table. So what do you want to do for the rest of the day until the show tonight? I asked Paula, as I turned the front page towards me. Well, I was thinking we could take a drive up and down the strip, get a feel for all the casinos and the restaurants, and then we could find a place to maybe stop, play a few slots. I know you always told me that they're rigged, but I still like to play them at least once. Oh, and then, if we have time... She continued on, but I wasn't listening to her anymore. Every sound in the restaurant seemed lower, like someone with a television remote had hit the volume button. I swear I could hear the blood rushing through my head, and I felt my mouth go dry as cotton. My heart began to beat almost as fast as it had in my chase, real or imaginary, and I felt as though the world were spinning. I kept staring at the front page of the paper, at the picture on the front of it, and at something else. Finally, a sound cut through the seemingly muted noises. Danny, what's going on? Paula asked me, reaching out and taking my free hand in hers. I lowered the newspaper and stared at her. My face must have been pale as a sheet because I saw extreme concern crease her beautiful features. What? She insisted. I took a moment to find my voice. Paula, sweetheart, I said weakly. We might have a problem. Silence for a moment. What? She asked, then looked at the paper. I saw her put two and two together. What did you read? She finally asked slowly. I set the paper down in the center of the table, turning it so she could see it properly. I saw her lean in and mouth the words as she read. I saw her expression change from concern to utter shock. She snapped her head up to look at me, as if to search my eyes for an explanation she so desperately needed, but I had none to give. The picture on the front of the page was of John F. Kennedy. I can't remember the exact headline it proclaimed above it, though I know it contained the words President Kennedy. But even now, almost 3 months being back, I could still perfectly recall the date displayed under the newspaper's name. July 22nd, 1962. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or for listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. It's still cold. I don't know if you guys have that major freeze that happened to me, but yeah, it's in Texas and it's snowing. So it's pretty damn cold, but you know what's not cold? A hot cup of tea, and my wife still sells tea. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. I cannot thank you guys enough. Thank you guys so much for being supporters. That goes for everybody who was down in the description, as well as AcidSystem, BallarmsTheRat, Blake Rattler, Mendoza, Brenna, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, Chainsmoker Dealer, ChicagoHitman, CoryxKenshin, CronutHitman, CrusaderChocobo, CursepoxPrimarch, Dakota Best, Poulsen, Dante Kinkade, Kraus, Ellie Hutmire, Enchanted Buns, Estebean, Gemma, HIDive, nephew, Jerry, Our Minute Seconds Time, Jay Keems, Jedis Pet, Jordan Humble, King Crab, Mr. Marcus Splits, Old Penguin, Peaceful Buddha, Psychomel, Red Shadowcat, Remember the Sun, Rinku Star, Salty Surprise, Samara Line, Seclude, Simba's Bloody Mojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, Sullyman, Tali Sue, the Chavez Brothers. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And sweet dreams.